I still remember the day I decided to get solar panels. It was a warm, cloudless afternoon in June. The kind of day where the sun feels like it's sitting right on top of your roof, cooking your attic and skyrocketing your energy bill. I opened my monthly utility statement and nearly choked on my coffee, $482.67. And that wasn't even the peak of summer yet. At first, I laughed it off. Maybe we left the AC running too much. But deep down, I knew this wasn't sustainable. Between groceries going up, gas prices bouncing all over the place, and now this? Something had to give. That night, I stayed up researching solar panels. I read every blog, watched every YouTube video, and joined homeowner forums full of glowing testimonials. People were saving hundreds, some even thousands, a year. And the best part? Government incentives made it surprisingly affordable. I was sold. The next morning, I called a local solar company. By the end of the week, a rep came out, walked me through my options, and showed me how fast the panels would pay for themselves. Everything made sense. It wasn't just about saving money. It was about making an investment in my home and my future. But here's the thing. I didn't tell the HOA. Not because I was trying to be sneaky, but because I genuinely thought, why would they care? It's my roof. My money. My decision. I didn't think slapping a few panels up there would stir the pot. Oh, how wrong I was. The installation happened on a Friday. I took the day off work just to watch it go up. I stood in the driveway, arms crossed, grinning like a kid on Christmas. The sleek black panels glinted in the sunlight, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was one step ahead of the system. Neighbors walked by, some nodding with approval. One guy even stopped to ask for the installer's number. It felt good, like I was doing something smart. Something future-proof. That feeling didn't last long. The following Monday, I came home to a neatly folded letter taped to my front door. The envelope was stark white, my name typed in bold black letters, not handwritten, not friendly. Just cold. Impersonal. I remember standing on my porch, heart already sinking as I peeled it open. It was from the HOA. It didn't say, "Congratulations on going green," or "Thanks for doing your part for the environment." No. It was more like a warning shot. Your recent unauthorized exterior modification violates Article 4, Section 2 of the Oak Ridge Meadows HOA Covenant. Immediate removal is required. Failure to comply will result in further action. That's when I knew I had poked the bear. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. My mind started racing. What did I miss? Was there a rule against solar? Did I overlook some fine print? I rushed inside, tore through my filing cabinet, and found the HOA handbook buried under a stack of old bills. Flipping through the pages, I saw it, buried deep in the most boring legal jargon imaginable. All external modifications to property must be approved in writing by the HOA Architectural Committee before installation. This includes, but is not limited to, solar energy devices. I wanted to scream. Was this really about aesthetics? Or was it just another way for them to control every inch of my life? The panels were already installed. Paid for. Wired. Working. It wasn't like I could just return them like a pair of shoes. And what was the alternative? Pull them down, eat the cost, and keep paying sky-high bills just to please a committee of retirees with clipboards? No. I wasn't going down without a fight. I emailed the HOA immediately, explaining my case. I even apologized for the lack of communication, said I'd be happy to provide the specs, warranties, even photos. I asked, begged, really, for a retroactive approval. I thought, maybe if I was respectful, maybe if I showed them I wasn't trying to defy them, they'd show some understanding. Days passed. No reply. Then came the second letter, this time certified. I had to sign for it. Same tone, but this one ended with a much more chilling line. Failure to remove the unauthorized installation within 14 days will result in legal proceedings. That's when it got real. I stood in my kitchen, letter in hand, staring out the window at those solar panels like they were some kind of criminal offense. I never imagined that trying to save a little money and do something environmentally responsible would paint a target on my back. My wife was furious, not at me, but at the situation. "What kind of neighborhood punishes people for trying to do the right thing?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we were now in a standoff with a board of people who had nothing better to do than enforce rules written decades ago, for a world that no longer existed. Every day after that felt tense. I noticed people slowing down as they walked past our house. Whispers. Side eyes. Even a few neighbors I used to chat with suddenly went quiet. The HOA didn't just want the panels gone. They wanted to make an example out of me. And I hadn't even begun to realize how far they'd go to do it. It came on a Wednesday. I remember that detail vividly because I was halfway through my work-from-home day, trying to focus on a Zoom meeting, when the doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the house, sharp and unexpected. I wasn't expecting any packages, and for a second, I thought maybe it was just another neighbor, maybe someone coming to talk about the panels, finally. I opened the door, and instead of a neighbor, there was a man in a gray polo with a clipboard and an envelope. He didn't smile. He didn't say much. Just a curt nod and one sentence. "You've been served." I froze. The door slowly closed behind me as I stared at the envelope in my hand. It was thick. Heavier than the last few letters from the HOA. My pulse started to pick up. I opened it right there on the porch, barely aware of the heat of the sun pressing against the back of my neck. Inside were court documents. The Oak Ridge Meadows Homeowners Association was suing me. Suing me. I had to read it 3 times before the words actually registered. The charges were clear as day. Non-compliance with HOA architectural guidelines, breach of covenant terms, and failure to remove unauthorized modification. They were demanding not only that I take down the solar panels immediately, but that I also pay $7,500 in fines and cover all legal fees associated with the suit. My hands were shaking by the time I finished flipping through the pages. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This wasn't a warning anymore. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was war. I walked inside like a ghost, the envelope dangling from my hand. My wife was in the kitchen making lunch when she looked up and saw my face. Her expression changed instantly. "What happened?" she asked, rushing over. I handed her the documents in silence. She didn't even make it past the first page before she muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." I sat down at the dining table, heart pounding, mind racing. How had it come to this? Just 2 weeks ago, I was excited about finally reducing our energy bill. Now I was being dragged into a legal fight with a neighborhood committee acting like a corporate law firm. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. What did I do wrong? Was trying to save money and help the environment really such a crime? But deeper than the confusion was the anger. The kind of anger that simmers quietly at first, then builds with every new thought. Why didn't they just talk to me? Why go straight to court? Why try to ruin someone over a few solar panels? The next morning, I decided to stop wondering and start getting answers. I showed up at the HOA office. Yes, they actually have a tiny office nestled inside the community clubhouse. Documents in hand, jaw clenched, ready for a real conversation. The receptionist, a younger woman who looked like she wanted to be anywhere but there, asked me to wait while she got someone from the board. After 10 minutes, an older man walked in. Gray hair, round glasses, and a clipboard that might as well have been his sword. His name tag read, "Martin, HOA Chair." Perfect. I introduced myself, politely, still holding out hope that this was just some overreaction, something that could be fixed with a conversation. Martin didn't shake my hand. He looked at me like I was a troublemaker. "I received the lawsuit notice," I said calmly. "I was hoping we could talk about this before it escalates further." He didn't even flinch. "There's nothing to talk about," he replied. "You violated the covenant. That's the end of it. But I'm willing to cooperate." I insisted. I'm not trying to be difficult. I thought solar panels were a good thing. Environmentally. Financially. Even for the home's value. I didn't know approval was required, and when I realized it, I reached out immediately. Martin raised his eyebrows. Ignorance doesn't excuse noncompliance, he said flatly. You made a unilateral decision. You skipped the process. That's what this community is built on, order. Order? I asked, a little louder than I meant to. You call suing your neighbors over solar panels order? For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance? Disdain? I couldn't tell. But whatever it wasn't empathy. He leaned forward slightly. This isn't personal, he said coldly. It's about precedent. If we let you slide, what's to stop others from doing the same? What if someone paints their house lime green next? What if someone installs a windmill in their front yard? I stared at him, stunned. That was it. That was their reasoning. They weren't upset about the panels themselves. They were scared of losing control. I walked out of that office with a fire in my chest. My wife met me in the parking lot. I had texted her to come along but told her to wait in the car in case things got heated. They're not backing down, I told her as I slammed the door shut. Her response was simple and immediate. Then neither are we. That night, I did more research than I'd ever done in my life. I looked up HOA legal battles, read state laws, even reached out to a few attorneys who specialized in homeowner rights. And that's when I discovered something interesting. Our state had passed legislation protecting homeowners' rights to install solar panels, with limited exceptions. Suddenly, the fear turned into something else. Hope. I might have made a mistake by skipping the HOA's approval process, sure. But they weren't just enforcing the rules anymore. They were crossing a line. And I wasn't going to be their scapegoat. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up to a system that thinks it can crush anyone who dares to question it. And so, I made a decision. I was going to fight back. I always thought court was something that happened to other people. You see it on TV, shiny floors, angry judges, lawyers pacing dramatically. You never imagine you'll be standing there yourself, sweating through your shirt, heart pounding so loudly it drowns out everything else. But there I was, 1 month after that HOA lawsuit was dropped on my doorstep, standing in the hallway of our local civil courthouse. Clutching a folder full of printed emails, contractor invoices, warranty papers, even photos of other homes in the neighborhood with unapproved changes. I had done my homework. What I didn't expect was how real it would all feel. As soon as I walked into that courtroom, I saw them, the HOA board. Martin, of course, front and center, arms crossed, dressed like he was about to host a funeral. 2 other board members sat beside him. I recognized them both, Susan, the one who always smiled too hard at the block parties, and Greg, who once yelled at my daughter for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. None of them looked at me. Not even a glance. The judge entered, and we all stood. I tried to focus, tried to breathe, but the whole time, I felt like I was standing trial for something far worse than solar panels. Like I had broken some invisible law of order they worshipped more than anything else. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rachel, leaned over and whispered, "Let them talk first. Then we show them the law." And talk they did. Martin stood and delivered his statement like he'd been rehearsing it for weeks. He spoke about rules. About structure. About the importance of following procedures to maintain community harmony. He even brought up fictional scenarios, residents installing disruptive, futuristic technology, without oversight, turning our quiet neighborhood into a chaotic mess. It was almost laughable, if it hadn't been about my home. Then it was our turn. Rachel stood up, calm and composed. She began by citing the state solar access law, which clearly limited HOA authority to outright block or remove solar panels unless they caused serious safety or structural issues, which mine didn't. She even pulled up previous court rulings that set the precedent. And then she said the words that lit something in me. Your Honor, this lawsuit isn't about a rule violation. It's about control. My client reached out in good faith. He asked for retroactive approval. He wanted to work with the HOA, not against them. But they didn't respond. They escalated. They weaponized the legal system to make an example out of a homeowner who made an environmentally conscious choice. Martin shifted in his seat. Greg rolled his eyes. But I could tell the judge was listening. Still, it wasn't over. After the hearing ended, we were told the decision wouldn't be made immediately. The judge wanted to review the documents and case law before issuing a ruling. I walked out of the courthouse with a strange mix of emotions. Relief that I finally got to speak. Anger that it even came to this. And fear that despite everything, the system might still side with the people in power. But the worst part? The cold stares didn't stay in the courtroom. They followed me home. The next morning, I went to grab the mail and saw Mrs. Decker across the street, a neighbor who used to wave every time she saw me. Not today. She looked right through me like I was invisible. At the grocery store that weekend, someone I'd chatted with a dozen times at HOA barbecues avoided my eyes in the frozen food aisle. At my daughter's school pickup, a few parents who I used to talk with stood in a huddle whispering. One of them looked up, locked eyes with me, then quickly turned away. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a social exile. Some of these people didn't even know the details. They just heard lawsuit and HOA and made their assumptions. That I was some kind of troublemaker. A rule breaker. Someone who thought they were above the rest. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. All I wanted was to lower our electric bill and do something responsible. I didn't ask to be dragged into court. I didn't ask for war. I just didn't want to be bullied into submission by people who valued lawn height and mailbox color more than the future of our planet. My wife held it together better than I did. She smiled through it all, helped our daughter with school projects, baked cookies like nothing had changed. But one night, I caught her crying quietly in the bathroom, wiping her face before coming out like nothing happened. That hurt more than the lawsuit ever could. A few nights later, we heard a knock at the door. I'd opened it to find a man I didn't recognize standing awkwardly on our porch. He was in his mid-50s, wearing a flannel jacket, holding a cup of coffee. He introduced himself as Tom. Said he lived a few streets over. I just wanted to say, he began. I saw what's happening. With the HOA. I think it's crap. I blinked, surprised. He went on to tell me that he'd considered solar, too. That he'd even gotten a quote but got scared off because of the same HOA rules. They used the handbook like a weapon, he said. You're not the first they've come after. But you're the first to fight back. And just like that, the isolation cracked. He wasn't the only one either. A few days later, another neighbor emailed me. Then another. One even said they were considering organizing a petition to amend the HOA rules, because apparently, they were outdated, and it was high time someone stood up to the nonsense. I realized something then. The HOA wanted to make an example out of me. But in doing so, they might have created a spark they couldn't control. I was no longer just a guy with solar panels. I had become a symbol. And as we waited for the judge's verdict, the line between silence and support started to blur. People who once avoided me were suddenly reconsidering their stance. Not all, of course. But enough. Enough to make it clear. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. There comes a point in every battle where fear burns off and something else takes its place. Resolve. For me, that moment came the night I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a spreadsheet of our monthly expenses. There, under the electricity column, I saw a number I never thought I'd see again, $88.42. That's what the solar panels had done. Even under the weight of a lawsuit, social isolation, and HOA intimidation, they were working. That's when I realized I wasn't the one in the wrong. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't trying to rebel. I was simply living in the future while the HOA was stuck in the past. So, I stopped playing defense. It started with information. I dug deeper into state laws and solar access protections. I reached out to the local Clean Energy Coalition, who not only confirmed that I had a strong case, but also offered resources to help spread awareness about HOA overreach. Turns out, there were dozens of people in my county alone who had faced similar battles. Some had caved. Others had moved away. But none of them had taken it all the way to court. None had stood their ground like I was now. I started documenting everything: emails, letters, photos, even HOA meeting recordings I legally obtained. I created a file so thorough, so airtight, that even my attorney Rachel raised an eyebrow when I handed it over. "You're serious about this?" she said. "Dead serious," I replied. Next, I went public. I didn't mean to at first. I was just venting on a community Facebook group, posting a photo of the lawsuit letter, with personal info blacked out, and explaining what was going on. I expected maybe a few comments. What I got was a firestorm. The post blew up overnight. People were shocked, outraged, supportive. A few trolls, of course, there always are, but the majority were on my side. Some said they had no idea the HOA even had the power to sue over things like solar panels. Others shared similar horror stories: paint colors denied, kids' swing sets removed, even someone fined for leaving their trash bin out too long. It struck a nerve. Within 2 days, a local news reporter reached out to me. She wanted to do a story. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to be that guy, the one on TV, airing dirty laundry for the world to see. But my wife, ever the realist, said something that stuck with me. "You've already been made the villain in their version of the story. Why not tell the real one?" So I did. The interview aired the following week. It was simple: me standing in front of my house, the sleek black panels behind me, calmly explaining what had happened. The clip of Martin refusing to speak on camera said more than anything I could have. The HOA didn't look like guardians of the neighborhood anymore. They looked like bullies. After that, everything changed. Emails started pouring in, not just from neighbors, but from people all over the state. Homeowners thanking me. Activists offering help. Even a few lawyers offering pro bono support if I wanted to take this further, maybe even go after the HOA for damages if we won. And that's when I had my second realization. I wasn't just fighting for my right to keep solar panels anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd ever felt powerless in their own home. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread, and for once, it wasn't just the same 10 retirees in folding chairs. Younger families showed up. Renters. New homeowners. People who never thought they had a voice in these things. When I stood up to speak during the open forum, the room actually fell silent. "I never wanted this to turn into a fight," I began. "I just wanted to save money and help the environment. But I've learned something these past few months, that a lot of you are just as frustrated as I am. You feel like this board doesn't represent your interests. That rules are being used to intimidate instead of protect. And honestly, you're not wrong." Martin scowled from his seat, but for once, he didn't interrupt. I continued. "We can do better. We have to do better. This isn't 1987 anymore. Times have changed. And it's time our rules reflect that." People clapped. Some even stood. That night, a small group approached me and asked if I'd help them start a motion to amend the HOA bylaws. We didn't want to abolish the HOA, we just wanted it to be fair, transparent, modern. So we got to work. We organized, drafted petitions, talked to lawyers, held informal neighborhood meetups in garages and backyards. The same people who once avoided eye contact at the grocery store were now bringing cookies to planning meetings and offering to canvass door to door. The momentum was real. Meanwhile, the court decision still loomed. Rachel warned me that the judge could rule either way. "Don't get overconfident," she said. "Even with the law on your side, HOAs have a long history of bending things." I nodded. I knew the risks. But for the first time in months, I felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. The HOA didn't know what to do with all of this. They tried to play damage control, sending out newsletters with vague threats about misinformation and preserving community values. But the damage was done. The neighborhood had seen behind the curtain. And suddenly, the so-called Goliath didn't seem so big anymore. Still, the battle wasn't over. Not until the judge ruled. Not until we knew, truly knew, whether all of this was worth it. But I wasn't backing down. Not when my daughter stood beside me one afternoon, looking up at those panels and saying, "I think it's cool that we use the sun. It's like we have superpowers." Not when families I'd never spoken to before were stopping by to ask how they could get solar too. Not when a neighborhood once divided by silence was finally starting to speak up. I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted my home back. And I was willing to fight like hell to get it. The courthouse looked exactly the same that morning, but I didn't feel the same walking in. This time, my hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. I wasn't walking in with fear sitting heavy in my stomach. This time, I walked in knowing I had already won, in one way or another. Still, the stakes were real. If the judge sided with the HOA, I'd either have to remove the solar panels or face massive fines. Worse, I'd be sending a message to everyone watching that power wins. That standing up gets you crushed. Rachel met me outside, as calm as ever. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." We stepped into the courtroom. Martin and the rest of the board were already seated, looking polished, cold, distant. I could tell they were confident. Probably figured the system would protect them like it always had. But that morning, something was different. A local news crew was there, quietly filming in the back row. A few neighbors had shown up, too, people I barely knew months ago who now stood behind me like friends. Even Tom, the guy from a few streets over, gave me a subtle nod as I walked past. The judge entered, and we all rose. He didn't waste time. The ruling was already typed out. His voice was calm, measured, but every word he read felt like it echoed in the room. The court finds that the Homeowners Association overstepped its authority in filing suit against the defendant for installing solar panels. The state solar access statute clearly protects the right of homeowners to install solar energy systems, and the plaintiff failed to demonstrate any legitimate safety or structural concerns. Martin shifted in his seat. Furthermore, the defendant made reasonable efforts to seek approval and act in good faith, while the association failed to respond appropriately and instead pursued litigation. My breath caught. The court hereby rules in favor of the defendant. The lawsuit is dismissed. The HOA is ordered to update its guidelines to comply with state law, and to reimburse the defendant for all legal fees incurred as a result of this action. I didn't hear the rest. Because in that moment, it was over. I had won. Not just for myself. Not just for my house or my bank account. But for every homeowner who'd ever felt helpless. For every person told to sit down, shut up, and follow the rules, even when the rules were broken. Rachel smiled and shook my hand. "Congratulations. You made history in your neighborhood." But the best moment? It wasn't the courtroom victory. It was later that evening back home. My daughter ran out into the yard, looked up at the panels on our roof, and shouted, "Daddy won!" And for the first time in months, my wife smiled without forcing it. We had dinner outside that night. Just us. No lawyers. No emails. No meetings. Just the sound of the breeze, the soft hum of the inverter on the side of the house, and the peace I hadn't felt in a long time. But here's the thing. It didn't end there. The court ruling lit a fire in the community. Within weeks, a group of neighbors gathered enough signatures to propose a bylaw amendment, modernizing the HOA rules to align with state laws and to ensure no homeowner could be sued like I was. When the vote came around, it passed with 72% approval. Martin resigned shortly after. The board was restructured. New faces stepped in, people who believed in transparency, in communication, in fairness. People who remembered that HOAs are supposed to serve the neighborhood, not control it. And me? I was asked to join the board. I said no. Not because I wasn't honored, but because I knew my role had been played. I wasn't interested in politics or power. I just wanted to live, to go back to being a regular guy who made a smart decision for his family. But I did give a short speech at the next community meeting. I stood there, in the same room where I was once ignored, and said this. What happened to me could have happened to any of you. It has happened to some of you. This wasn't about panels. It was about control, about being punished for thinking independently. But here's the truth, we are not powerless. We are not voiceless. When we stand together, we change things. Let this be a reminder, to this neighborhood and every HOA across the country. You can't bully people into silence forever. I didn't expect applause. But I got it. So here's my message to every homeowner watching this. If you're feeling pushed around by your HOA, if you're scared to speak up because you think it won't matter, if you've been told you don't have a say, you do. Start small. Ask questions. Document everything. Know your rights. And if they threaten you, don't back down. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to stand up. And the walls of silence come crashing down. This wasn't just a story about solar panels. It was a story about reclaiming ownership, not just of my home, but of my voice. And that, more than anything else, is something no HOA can take away from you.